that there is an audience and a public out there who wholeheartedly love hospitality. And we're worrying about it dying? Like, fuck off, no way. Like, we'll be fine. The people are ready.
When I think about Dan Sims, I see rooms full of people. I feel a sense of great conviviality. I feel ensconced in the celebration of people, many people doing things together. Dan Sims runs Revel. It's an event company. Started with wine, but moving into cheese. But being in the event business, Dan, it's not really ideal at the moment, is it?
Hi, Danny, and hi, everyone. Well, look, as a mass gathering business, it's let's just say it's been quite a challenging year, 2020, for sure.
Tell us what you were about to do as the pandemic closed down upon us.
Oh, wow, where to start, huh? I mean, what a ride. Look, I think, as I said, we are all about bringing people together, and we were 5 days away from running what was to be our biggest cheese festival in Brisbane called Mould, and we obviously had to shut that down. And yeah, it's funny looking back now and just how fast things were rapidly changing when all that information was coming at hand. So we were in a sort of interesting position where we go, okay, right, we had to postpone the event. That's one thing. And then the second thing was, our cheese producers had made around 1.5 to almost 2 ton of cheese for that event. And with restaurants shutting down very quickly after mass gatherings, we had to really work hard to help them sell that product. So that was that was one of the first challenges. But yeah, it's funny, even going back even before COVID, 2020. I mean, can you remember the bushfires that happened at the start of the year? We already had a range of producers that were already directly impacted, whether it be from the fires themselves or the impact from tourism. So we were really looking forward to getting back to getting out in front of people, getting the brand out there, helping them sell cheese. So them having that sort of excess stock was a way to go, okay, well, how can we move fast to help and support them? And through our experience with our wine events, we've always encouraged people to buy direct, but we very quickly discovered that a lot of the producers weren't necessarily set up for direct to consumer sales. So hence, after a lot of scrambling, we established the Mould Cheese Collective, which was a way to go, okay, right, well, how can we help and add value and help them get their product to people, whether that be through the Mould audience or Pinot Palooza audience. But yeah, it's I look back, as I said, it was a crazy time, wasn't it? At the start of COVID.
Well, it was, and I remember you putting a post on Facebook about this 1.5 tons of cheese, and now I was thinking, okay, who can I send this to in Brisbane? We've got to get rid of this cheese.
Yep.
But it's probably one of the first COVID pivots, hey, because it was really very much in the moment that you were scrambling to do that. And I didn't realise, because I know now that you do the Mould Cheese Collective, like a sort of a monthly cheese boxes, but I hadn't quite joined the dots to realise that it sprang from that period in the middle of March when we were all wondering what on earth was going on.
Oh, absolutely. And again, it's that word pivot, right? And it's funny, if anyone who probably knows me, I kind of like to think I can move pretty fast. But, with the challenge of COVID coming in very, very rapidly, I actually felt like I kind of had to slow down a little bit, because as everyone in that sort of mad scrambles it was, everyone was pivoting as fast as they possibly could. And I was sort of, well, if you pivot too fast, you end up spinning and you end up going nowhere. And because there was so much peril, let's call it, in the system, and anxiety around what was going to happen, I was like, okay, well, whatever we do, it has to remain core to what we believe in or the event to be. And that was about connecting people to producers. And be on brand as to what, and celebrating great Australian cheese. And I think what I've probably in hindsight, we moved relatively fast. I think when we made the call to set up the collective, but maybe we probably could have moved a little bit faster. But because we were still trying to understand what it actually meant. Because let's face it, mass gatherings were the first to go, and they will be the last to come back. And there's an awful lot to unpack there. And I think with the collective was a really great way to go, okay, well, this is something we can do now. And it's something that we can build and help and add value to not just cheesemakers, but also the audience, but not to do something. This wasn't the time to do something frivolous, if that makes sense. And
yeah,
because
totally,
it was like, because I knew that we were in a, COVID happened probably it's never a great time for a global pandemic, but from our business, it kind of hits us right at a particularly vulnerable stage because we're coming out of a period where we haven't got events, and we'd already postponed one of our events in February, Bread and Circus, which we were, with our co-founder Sharon from the Fermentary, because of the impact of the bushfires. So then we're going, okay, right, let's go to March, let's get this, and then all of a sudden COVID. So we hadn't really run a major event until October. So we were in a quite precarious position where we needed to get trading to get ourselves back up to scratch. So then all of a sudden, our revenue went to zero, within 24 hours. And
so Dan, let's just pull back a little bit. And for people who don't know about Revel, and maybe they don't know about Pinapalooza, and they don't know who you mean when you say we, can you just give us the picture of what your business was?
Yeah. So again, Revel, we do events. Is probably the easiest way to describe it. And we've been running a major event called Pinapalooza. We from 2019, running that in 13 cities and 6 countries. We run Mold at Cheese Festival and a range of others, whether it be Saki Matsuri, and we're developing Bread and Circus with Sharon. And it's always been about connecting people to primary producers and having a damn fun time doing it at the same time. So, our team, I say used we, but we are a small team. There's 5 of us in total. And I think this thing, when something like COVID came along, it as I said, for mass gathering, it stopped kind of overnight. And I think at that point, it was a lot of uncertainty around what was happening. And I think, looking at it at that point there for Mold in Brisbane, where we're going, okay, right, well, let's push this down the road. Let's postpone the event until mid-August. Surely 6 months. That should be fine. That should be okay. And it was like, okay, well, how do we move that? And had to change that and change venues, and we worked really hard to try and get that. I think we're really great, very lucky and grateful. We've got such a great, our ticket holders were phenomenally supportive. And, they were like, yep, no worries, how can we help? And which was incredible. But so, in terms of our events itself, our last major event would have been in October for Pinapalooza in Brisbane, funnily enough. And it would have been around 6 months since we'd run another major event, which we were 5 days away from, which that stopped. So it was a pretty tough time where you're kind of staring down the barrel going, wow, this is, this is it. This could be it. But how do we add value, and how do we keep going in a position of fiscal vulnerability? So hence I sort of go back to what I was saying before about kind of slowing down a little bit, because I said the peril was real, and I was like, I knew if there was one misstep that could have snowballed into absolute failure of the business. And I think it was with anyone is like, well, how do we hold on? How do we just grip on hard and keep us going until that point where we can get back to a sense of normal? So hence we put our energies in the Mold Collective. And I think where I said to the team was, all right, guys, if we can run an event in another country where we don't even speak the language, I'm pretty sure we can figure out how to get a box of cheese to somebody in another state. let's go. And it was literally, and testament to the team, they did it. And it was just like, okay, and that's like with anyone through this period of pivots and change. And it's like anything, isn't it? It's that wonderful adage of, we didn't have any money, so we had to think. And when you sort of put under that pressure of going, okay, well, every dollar counts, how can we do this effectively, and how do we help, not hinder, and also, or add further noise to what was happening out there, rather than, and for us, it's always been about, look, how do we help the producer? How do we sort of celebrate them? How do we champion them? And not using the words like save Australian cheese. For me, I've always found that really, saving a farmer, we should support and celebrate them. I mean, as you probably, you've met farmers before, they're a bunch of resilient bastards, and I think we should help them and celebrate them rather than save them. But again, like a lot of the producers, they'd already been through challenges with the bushfires. They were just they were getting geared up for a really massive Easter, because there was incredible campaigns like Empty Esky and Road Trip for Good, and everyone was geared up for a really...
We were all going to be out there.
All going to be out there.
With our Eskies.
Absolutely. And then bang, it stopped again. So it was like the double whammy for a lot of producers. And so again...
Did you gain some sort of perspective from talking to those people? Like, as you say, super resilient, been through everything except perhaps a pandemic. Would they... Did you get some sort of strength and succor from those people?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they're incredible. And one of the things we've done with Mould is that we have our own humble little Mould podcast. And that's been incredible to, again, document what's happening with them at that particular time as well. And they're incredible. Like, and I've had some really amazing conversations with them going, they hit their local communities. There was a huge amount of support locally. And I think, in general, especially in Australia, we're very much all about, like, as I said, we were geared up to get out to regional areas and support them. So there was this incredible goodwill out there, but it was a case of, well, how do we get their product to people who are interested? And I think that's kind of where we looked at it going, okay, right, well, we'll take care of the digital stuff and the marketing and the comms and the websites and all of that. And you make cheese, you get it to us, we'll get it out to people. And it was a good.
And how's it been going? Has it been going well enough to keep your staff employed?
Oh, it's incredible. It's been great. Look, it's certainly not replacing what we were doing, but it's been a journey and a challenge, absolutely, like anything. But it is. It's like we've been managed to keep the team, all employed. If we're all on 4 days a week, we're all on JobKeeper, of course. But I think the goal will be to get to a point where I think with any business, is to be able to be fiscally independent of JobKeeper. But it's growing, and which is fantastic, and we are enjoying it. It's kind of to that point where, like, why don't we do this before? This is great. But again, it's like pre-COVID, everyone's like, you're so busy on the roller coaster. We'd go from one event to the other, and we were doing around 40 events a year of varying sizes in so many different cities, and traveling a third of the year. And I think for the first time ever, it was like, okay, guys, we have got one job. We've got one singular focus to channel our energies into, rather than trying to juggle multiple event brands in multiple cities and multiple areas. But I should say as well, like, with events and mass gatherings, it's important to remember that, if one event stops, it's not just the event organizer. Events are an economic ecosystem that impacts hundreds of businesses. So for Mould alone, say for the Brisbane event, as well as postponing Melbourne and Sydney, that was worked it out, it's around 150 businesses that were involved in delivering that festival, as well as a multitude of staff, whether it be temporary and casual. For something like Pinot Palooza at the Royal Exhibition Buildings, that's about 4,000 people. That's around 120 businesses for a one-day
Yeah.
festival. So the impact of shutting down of the mass gathering or events or arts industry, it's significant. And there was no real opportunity to do takeaway sales or, to help keep going. And we're fortunate enough to go, right, okay, let's focus on our mold, but there's still other, the arts and live music and, theatres and all of these things that, we sometimes gets forgotten a little bit in the conversation around what's happening with COVID, is because, these are all, I'm hospitality. I've had my entire career in hospitality. It is in my blood. I've always said that we're not in events, we're in hospitality. That's at the core value of what Revel believes. But saying that, hospitality does not have a monopoly on the culture of a city. It's insanely significant, absolutely, but so is the arts and theatre and live music and sporting events, and all of these things add to the culture and vibrancy of a city. So when all of that suddenly goes, it's we're all in this together kind of vibe, and it's important to remember that how valuable the arts sector is to Australia. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, do you think, we're very connected to the hospitality world, so we do hear a lot of those conversations and, conversations from people who want, who are agitating for hospitality and for their businesses. Do you think that it's not quite like that in those other communities, in the arts community, for example?
Oh, I think it's pretty hard when you have a federal government that has such a low opinion of the arts, bordering on disdain. It's very tough. There's been a lot of promises, but not a lot of delivery. And it is a challenge. And I look at, again, it's not just us, but it's, so many artists or musicians or anything like that rely on people coming together. And yes, I know there's the straight away to counter to that is, we'll just make the events virtual. But some things don't necessarily translate into a digital world. And then all of a sudden there's the questions of, okay, well, if we do it virtually, are people willing to pay for it? And if they are willing to pay for it, will that revenue sustain entire teams or artists? So I think it's and there's been a lot of fantastic pivots, especially in arts. When you look at MIF, who did a fantastic job of, doing that. There's loads of live gigs. Sounds Australia are doing some incredible things. So there is some shifts around it, but in terms of government, especially in federal, it's pretty lacking. And I don't really see that.
Well, there's a really clear antipathy to the arts at the federal level, and I think it's analogous to the antipathy towards universities.
Yes,
and I find it, pretty perplexing. Especially as government does reach out to those worlds for many things that the community obviously values, not least being a vaccine against coronavirus, but also politicians are happy to stand 1.5 meters from a famous musician who's put on a concert to support, whether it's bushfires, whether it's connecting us virtually through the pandemic. So I think, it's pretty bad. It's bad. It is bad for the arts. And I think the arts and hospitality do have so much in common, just in terms of providing meaning to people's lives, providing occasions for those great connections that we're able to make as people. And there's natural affinity, I think.
Oh, totally. And they're symbiotic. I spent most of my hospitality career working in this Melbourne CBD. Now, I can't tell you how many pre-theatre services and post-theatre services that I did. It's all part of it, right? It's all part of that whole going to the city and having a fabulous experience. So it's intertwined. So I suppose it is hard, and I get it. You know, again, I'm hospitality through and through, and I love it. And I suppose I get a little frustrated. You know, there's been a lot of vitriolic commentary, you know, around the pandemic, and I get it. People are angry and frustrated, and it's hard. But you know, COVID won't be the death of hospitality. Like it won't. Like it just won't. It will. I think it will be better as a result, and it will thrive after. But to have just hospitality without everything else, you know, it's like you don't go to a region to visit a winery. You go out to a region to visit for an entire experience. I go to restaurants not just for one thing, but I might go to multiple places in one night or see multiple aspects, you know. And that's the beauty of it. And you know, hospitality is, oh fuck, Danny, you know, I mean, it was pretty tough before COVID, you know, and everyone's talking about wanting to go back to normal. Normal was hard. Normal was really hard.
Normal didn't work for everybody.
No.
But why do you think that it will be better? Why do you think we'll come out of this better?
Because what it's probably doing is, if anything, COVID's shone a massive spotlight on all of the vulnerabilities and challenges that multiple industries have had to face but potentially ignored. But we haven't had to, because we've wrapped it up in this veil of positive social media posts where everything's okay, because we don't want to appear that there are some challenges. So all COVID's doing is literally holding up a mirror and saying, there are some real issues here and you have to deal with this. And look, you know, no business, I don't want any business to go under, but some places may, you know, not come back or not come out of COVID. But some businesses, I mean, you've seen hospitality evolve, and you see these businesses turn up, and some, you know, you kind of look at it and go, this is only being sustained because it's such a, you know, should it really be there? You know, it's like, just because it can doesn't mean you should. And it will be, if anything, it should be an equilibrium that'll come out with some businesses don't, and therefore others will be better. And if anything, better systems will be in place, better economics about how the actual businesses run. But the innovation that's come out of COVID, it's been phenomenal. Like, you know, I think the model moving forward will look, you know, there'll be some things that'll be the same, but some things will be really different. I mean, I look at straight away, off the top of my head at the start of COVID, the Marion veggie boxes, right? I live north side, and they were incredible. Like, I was like, why didn't we have this before COVID? This is amazing. Like, and the quality of produce that was in those things was amazing to see groups like that really move fast to add value. You know, again, Meatsmith as an example, or, you know, Angie de Poca, and all these places that, you know, again, we talk about farmers being resilient, but man, hospo are pretty hard too. You know, we'll be okay.
Yeah, we've definitely seen a lot of resilience and creativity. You speak about, you know, seeing restaurants that perhaps you wonder if, you know, they were necessary. We wonder whether Melbourne really needed them. When you think about things that should change, like what specifically are you talking about?
Oh, look, I think it's, look, let's face it, the cost of entry, or the education that goes into, or the barrier to entry in hospitality is relatively low. Now, and I worked in wine, for example, and if we really start to break it down, there's not really that much training that goes into teaching sommeliers, I'll use this just as an example, of how to run beverage programs. And some venues, for example, they might have a turnover of, you know, anywhere between $2 million to $5 million a year. And sometimes they go, okay, you're into wine, okay, you can run the wine program, and we'll give you one shift a week to run it. Now, if you can imagine any, any financial management service going, I have a $5 million portfolio on 8 hours a week, they'd kind of laugh at you with no training whatsoever about how to actually run that portfolio. And, there's a lot of challenges there that, have come back to bite us. And I think now it's a case of going, right, everyone has to look at it and go, should we be doing this? What does this do? Will this actually help? Are our staff trained enough? Are they paid enough? And all of these things that we just have to look at it and change the model. And again, I put it back to again what we do with some of our events. Like we were doing. Again, I'll take the responsibility. I'll say in this instance, that if anything fails in our business, that it's my fault, that we would do sort of things like, well, let's just give that a crack. Because you go, well, let's just see how it goes. Probably maybe should we have done it? Probably not. And we paid the price for it to end up getting us to a point where we were, a business could be vulnerable. But I think longer term, we have to be better for it. Or if we're not, then we've only got ourselves to blame. Because if, with any pivoting or what's happening now with hospitality, it's this idea of, if it pivot and it works, you're a genius. But if it fails, then, hey, you gave it a crack because it was COVID. But then coming out of it, it's going to be like, okay, well, right, what is the business that we really want to do? Do we want to go back to normal? Normal was really hard.
So if you look at that example with the sommelier who's responsible for a reasonably large wine program, but perhaps without the training or the support to make the best of it, and then you flip it and say, okay, well, there's a different scenario where that person is really well trained, they're really well supported. What are the advantages to that, both for the consumer, the person who comes in and wants to drink some wine, and the business?
Well, I think that also, and I should say as well, that's a similar example, but we could also say the same for chefs.
Sure.
We talk about food costs and how to actually run. It's the business of hospitality is critical, and I think we've failed a lot in terms of not educating and training stuff on the business of hospitality. I think people understand that the philosophy of hospitality and the skills that go around service, that type of thing, but the business is a bit of a challenge. So the value that would be is a case of, it's like anything. Like when I started, I knew I had to justify my existence in any job. I had to show value to the business, but also to the value to the customer. And I think, it very much depends upon the restaurant itself, doesn't it? And I look at some places, and again, I've similarly my whole career. Some places you go, well, we probably don't need it. We need a manager to run that side of the business moving forward. But also at the same time, you could argue that a lot of restaurant would run or rely on the profitability of the beverage program to heighten up the challenges and costs within the food side of the business. And so therefore it's like, it's robbing Peter to pay Paul. So it's like, well, let's have a look at everything and go, do we need this? Do we overcapitalize? And I think, again, that goes into so many other systems that come in place. And it's not just a matter of saying to customers, well, you have to spend more. I kind of find that really annoying. It's like blaming the consumer. It's like, well, man, that's a very easy get out because there's a multitude of factors that go into it. I mean, look at rents, commercial rents and things like that. I think COVID's going to really has shown that a lot of rents, commercial rents, are probably too high. Venues would overcapitalize in their initial investment. All of these things we've got to look at and go, do we need, in building a kitchen, do you need a massive kitchen? I mean, anyone who's gone to Napier Quarter and had dinner there, you don't need a big one for amazing food, So it's, I'm not saying.
Oh, Dan, now you made me sad. It's out of my 5K. I can't even go there for a sandwich.
Look, sitting in the window at Napier Quarter is one of my greatest joys, and I miss it terribly.
Yeah, that's a peak Melbourne experience. I suppose what I wonder when you're talking about that example. And obviously the smell is just an example. We're not picking on Soms or wine, but I feel like as a diner, if I'm paying for wine, I'm doing it at a restaurant because I want a bit of an experience as well. I don't know much about wine. I'd love some guidance. I'd love to know why this wine is suggested for this dish, and that probably is something that whether either I'd be prepared to pay a bit more for it, or I would understand what it was that I was paying for in the first place. So I think there's definitely, if you can demonstrate value, I think people will meet you there.
Oh, absolutely. And that goes for everything, doesn't it? Whether it's wine service or cocktails or bars or pubs or anything. It's like, it does the experience match the offering? And people will support it. Absolutely. I wholeheartedly believe it. I mean, the fact that a lot of venues have managed to stay afloat by takeaway and deliveries, that says that there is an audience and a public out there who wholeheartedly love hospitality. And we're worrying about it dying? Like, fuck off. No way. Like, we'll be fine. The people are ready. They're there. They're there to love it, and they love going out and dining. Just, we'll be okay. Hold the line. We're almost there. It's always hardest at the end. I want to go to the pub and have a beer as much as the next person, but also hospitality, I suppose, bringing it back to events, is that hospitality will leave the roadmap to mass gatherings. So as much as I know it affects my business, I don't want hospitality to open too early, too soon, and then have another wave. Because, if I'm looking to events and gatherings, like say for Mould, I'm mainly thinking maybe 500 people, maybe in March. That will be 18 months before we'd run a major event. That's an incredibly long time for any business to survive. Now, like anything, it's still perilous, what we're doing. But I think I reconciled early on that, okay, this could be it, right? This could be it. This could be the end of my business as I know it. So then I was like, okay. And as soon as I reconciled that, I was like, well, how do you want to go out? And I was like, well, I want to go out with the same drive and focus that we had when we run the business. I was like, all right, well, let's get on with it. Like, let's do the collective. Let's see what value we can add. Let's hold on. Let's show the same resilience. Let's help and support our community and our producers. Let's celebrate and champion the cheesemakers and also the wine producers. And let's just hold on. We'll get there.
Do you think we will get there? But have you considered not going back to mass gatherings? Has that been a question that you've posed along the way?
Oh, absolutely. Last weekend was October 3, and we should have been running Pinot-Palooza at Melbourne, and that's 4,000 people. And I look back at the photos there, and it's pretty hilarious. You look at it and go, wow, that's like another world. I think gatherings of
all those germs.
Oh, it's phenomenal, right? Like I look at just say, for example, here's a funny anecdote. Just say, for example, we can run an event of 4,000 people, and let's just say we're all comfortable doing that. I'd say that's probably 12 to 18 months away. How do you deal with spittoons?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
How do you deal with spittoons? Spittoons were gross before COVID, but people spitting out into a bucket near a stand that was just open, and then, so how do you deal with it? So the question is like, Mould's a little bit easier because it's more food, it's consumed, but I look at wine festivals of that scale and I go, oh, gee, I don't know. I don't know if that can work. And this sort of goes back to, we'll just do a virtual tasting. And a lot of people say that to me at the start. I'm like, well, I don't know about you, but watching someone talk about wine on TV was boring before COVID. Just because we're at home, doesn't mean it's more entertaining. and at the big
It's not. It's about being there.
It's about being there. It's the experience. So some things don't translate. So, and again, even with wine, I mean, again, I'm talking about shining a spotlight on things. Like very early on, I looked at Pinot Palooza and go, well, one of the biggest challenges we face is the fact that wine is in a stupid 750ml glass bottle. Like, and because I'm going, okay, well, maybe we could do a tasting at someone's home, or we have to send them 3 or 4 bottles. And I was like, well, I've got a bit of an issue with encouraging people to open multiple bottles of wine during a period of high stress and anxiety in their own home. Should we be doing that?
Yeah.
I was like, no, I don't want to do that. So, you know, we're working on a thing at the moment where we're almost got it ready to announce, and we think it's pretty cool. But it's a way to sort of find that happy medium between it. But the whole point of mass gatherings is connection and being with friends and having a fun and having a party in an environment. And, you know, we'll look, I'll say that for Pinot Palooza, we're going to give it a big swing at what we think it could be. I'm not saying it's what it should be or what it could be, but it goes back to why Pinot Palooza existed in the first place. And that was to change the way wine tastings were done and a rebel against the death by masterclass philosophy, or, you know, the old white man masterclass that had been ingrained in wine for such a long time. And I feel like, you know, I'm quite proud of us and the team that I feel we accomplished that. So now it's like, okay, right, let's go back to the core value of what Palooza is all about, and what can a wine festival be like, or wine tasting be like, in a world post-COVID? Let's face that challenge, and let's ask some really hard questions and lean into it rather than sort of, you know, push back against it. Like, you know, it's like, oh, I want to go back to normal. It's like, no, it's not. Forget about normal. Like, let's look at what does it mean? Like, lean into it, and, you know, let's find the innovation and rewrite the rules, because, you know, the rule book's gone. We just have to, you know, be confident within the skills. And that's, again, what I say back, I'm confident in hospitality. I'm so confident that hospitality will thrive as a result, because there's so many great operators.
I love it, Dan. I love your optimism. And as we all move closer towards a COVID-safe spittoon, I really
it's so gross, isn't it, right?
to seeing what you come up with. Yeah, it's been a pleasure over the years to watch you shake up that staid world of wine tasting. Or not to say it's always stayed, but it certainly can be. And you've certainly brought a different energy to it and introduced a lot of people to a lot of wines in a way that is, it's not pretentious, it's welcoming, and that's to be celebrated. I'm really grateful to have you speak to us today on Dirty Linen, and to give us a bit of a different vision for how things could be. So thank you so much for sharing your views today.
Thanks so much, Danny. And again, I have to say thank you for your advocacy and passion and enthusiasm for all things hospitality, for this podcast, and to Anthony Huckstep and everyone at Deep in the Weeds. Thank you for all that you do. It's incredible.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure to be part of the Weeds team, and I'll give a shout out to our producer, Rob Locke, as well. So, yeah, thanks so much, Dan. We'll talk soon. This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Danny Vallant. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about. We spend a week thrashing around each issue, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtylinen@deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.
This is a Deep in the Weeds production.